Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Welcome back to the Rural Scoop. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf, and today I'm excited to sit down with a personal friend of mine. Some leaders talk about systems change, but Dr. Regina Washington-Arthur builds it. She started out in the hills of West Virginia. She was shaped by Berea College's ethics of service and justice, and she was forged as the first African American to earn a Doctor of Public Health at the University of Kentucky. She's led prevention and quality improvement for the Kentucky Public Health Department, standing up programs for healthy communities and family well-being. And then she scaled that work nationally by braiding public health, social systems, and education to move equity from an idea to implementation. Today, Regina leads the Rural Library Network, elevating libraries as community anchors, places where health literacy grows, early learning takes root, and cross-sector partnerships make rural renewal real. We're going to trace that journey. We're going to open the playbook for what's working now, and we're going to name the next moves that communities can make together. So let's get to it. Regina, welcome to the Rural Scoop.
Thank you, Dr. Sadorf.
Well, I am so glad that you're here, and I want you to take us home to West Virginia to get us started out. Talk to me a little bit about the values that your family and community gave you that still show up in your leadership work today.
Oh, my goodness. Growing up in the hills of West Virginia, as I always say, there are three things that I can really reflect back on that were really the foundations of my growth. And it really started out with faith and family. Really important that family believed in God and trust that we can definitely set our minds to our goals and achieve it if we continue to lean on God's power per se, right? So faith has always been one of our values, our family values. And another thing in terms of education, I always believed that education was a pathway out of poverty, out of teen pregnancy, out of, just unwanted types of outcomes. And so education, having a strong work ethic will open up the doors for opportunities, being committed to your passion and working hard toward your dreams, right? And another one is service. Learned that while back in terms of growing up, really observing my parents in service to the community, in service to the schools as they come and volunteer, and then also in service to our church was very, inspiring to me and also instrumental. We were so blessed to see my siblings and I were blessed to see our parents to really move from this challenge of poverty into purpose and really how they work every day in focusing in the holistic environment that they provided and grew for us is invaluable to allow us to be the successful individuals that we all are today, right? So, those values were very, very important to our success today.
Regina, can you point to a formative moment when you realized that your work would be service-centered?
As I think about I volunteered quite a bit as a young individual with regards to our community in West Virginia, volunteering for the actual parks and recreation. And during the Labor Days, Memorial Days, volunteered during those events and saw massive numbers of people there just happy, right? And I was happy to be a part of it. And as a young person working alongside of my parents in a lot of different ways, I can think about there is also a time when I volunteered at the hospital, and almost like the candy stripers. I don't know if I'm going. Hopefully, I'm not dating.
I was a candy striper too, so I get it.
Right. I hope I'm not dating myself, but there were times where I would go through the hospitals and just alongside of the candy stripers and go from room to room and bring them different, treats and cards and just to see them light up, the patients light up in their rooms. And there were some that hadn't had visitors in some time. And that would be one that it felt good to my heart to just give and be there, give my time. That was one that I knew, and that was in high school, right? Service also in terms of church, serving on different committees in church and making things move forward. I didn't need any pay. I didn't even know I was working really, to help build anything. All I know is I enjoyed working alongside of a group of people for a purpose, right? In building up the church and building up the community. And that felt good. And so with that being said, that was really the foundations that grounded me in service. As I matriculated through high school, I kept service at the forefront, year to year, volunteering to be a tutor to my classmates during the summertime. And again, volunteering in the community at various types of things, cleaning up the community, just some of those types of things that I was blessed to do. And again, neighbors showing up. That's another thing, too, is that living in a community is totally different, I think, a little bit today. But as I was growing up, the community, we supported one another. If you needed eggs, milk, bread, all you had to do was pretty much call on your neighbor.
Yeah.
They showed up in caring ways. That type of thing really resonated with me. I love that. And even so much now, I see that I've brought that with me in my own community, my own neighbors, as we share dinners together. But that in service of one another, it's still with me.
Mm. So those foundational roots of West Virginia met a mission at Berea College. So can you talk a little bit about how Berea expanded your sense of purpose and possibility?
Wow. Berea College really was in an alignment with a lot of my values. As I learned more about Berea and the history of the abolitionist, John G. Fee, and how he fought to have a classroom that was for Black and white students, and how he worked alongside of his community to keep those doors open. And of course, the day law came through and shut the college down. And then when it opened back up, it's still a commitment to, again, the sense of justice and sense of access to education for all. that resonated with me, right? And since going there as a student, really learning more about the educational opportunities there, it really taught me about liberation. And it taught me about responsibility, right? The responsibility of knowing that the more you learn, the more responsibility you have. And I knew that my footsteps were not my own. I was traveling on the shoulders of my great grandmothers and great grandpapas and my grandmother and my grandfathers, my mother, my mom, my mother and my papa, and my aunties and uncles. Being the first generation college student, I wasn't traveling alone through this experience. And so it was important for me to continue to grow and really strengthen my voice as I was in college, and sharpen my understanding about leadership, what that really meant in the world of, outside of college. Berea gave me a sense of hope and sense of that, really, that coming from a small town, that something powerful, I can be a part of something powerful in the world. And what really motivated me, really, before I went to Berea was, I used to play softball and, in athletics, and things of that nature. And one of my coaches and my grandmother took ill of cancer. And I learned so much about cancer on my own. I went to the libraries and went and did my own research about the cancers that stricken my coach and my grandmother. And that motivated me to go to school, to learn so that I can change and be the change that others needed, so that they would not fall stricken to the cancer or anything that could be prevented, right, through education. So there were a lot of different things that motivated me, that allowed, that Berea really awakened me to, that I had, the ability to make a difference in the world.
I love that. What habits or mindsets did you cultivate during your time there that really still guide how you convene partners and build coalitions and build relationships with each other?
Relationships is really all about that sense of culture that I grew up with. Again, that deep sense of relationship and partnerships. Working together with peer-to-peer was priceless. And being there, I knew the essence of connectivity. I knew the essence of maximizing your leadership with one another to make things happen, to strengthen the voice, to strengthen the leadership. So I come to understand, just as Berea has a work program and allowing every student to take a role in the success of the college, it takes a village. It takes the whole community to make the college work. So I saw firsthand of how partnerships make a difference. The students partner with administrators. The administrators partner with faculty. The faculty partner with the community at large, just to give that holistic experience for the students. So it's that 360, a continual cycle that really allow the sort of the sense of the readiness for every individual to grow, to learn, be lifelong learners, and to have long-term outcomes. And that followed me even after graduating from Berea. And I knew partnerships make a difference. And so even in my first professional position right out of undergrad, I worked for Berea for about 8 years. And during that, I worked firsthand partnering again with the community, the Berea College community, to make sure that the students had a safe and a supportive learning environment, both from in the classroom and outside of the classroom, holistically. And it continued to grow, even as you mentioned before, I was very blessed to have a full combination experience in the doctoral program there at University of Kentucky in public health. And once I graduated from that experience, I became the division director, and really understanding how partnerships work, even beyond public health, and recognizing that the three main factors of someone's success are education, health, and also income, having a financial base. And I knew that I could affect with partners the education, health literacy, just literacy in general, and health, having access and building healthy communities was the number one and number two priorities for me as a state leader here in Kentucky. And so, yes, partnerships, it's very important. And I see that now, even with the opportunity between libraries and schools to be able to partner to strengthen the access for children and families across rural communities, to have an opportunity for a successful outcome in life. It involves not only health and well-being, but housing, food resources. Again, it's only through and by partnerships that we can actually build those healthy communities to allow our children, our youth, to have an opportunity to thrive and be successful.
Yeah, well said. I want to go back to something you talked about just briefly, and that's the University of Kentucky, because you were the first African American to complete a Doctor of Public Health at that university, and that is both an achievement, but it's also a charge.
Right.
What did that milestone mean for you and for scholars and practitioners of color who would come after you?
Exactly. I didn't know that going in. Our class, my cohort, was the first cohort for University of Kentucky after they were able to get it accredited in terms of the doctoral program at the university. And I really didn't think about, that sort of characteristic or opportunity. But as we neared the ending part of our curriculum, the class got a little smaller, and I was able to make some great strides while being a student, a fellow, actually, in the program. I sat on the academic committee, academic affairs committee, the student affairs committee. I also sat on some other committees, which allowed me to provide a student voice, but also recognize my role as opening the pathway for those that followed me and continue to have that opportunity. It meant that using my voice, my position, my role to make change happen, and to also increase the awareness of those around the table. Being the only African American around the table with faculty and administrators, at the University of Kentucky as a doctoral student, I had to find my voice. There were times where the sensitivity of different social determinants, even though we were in public health and that's what we studied, it didn't always come into the rooms where we discussed different policies and different opportunities, different fellowship opportunities, different, things that sometimes that people of color may not always have the opportunity to have access to. So I found myself lifting up thoughtful statements for those faculty and administrators around those committees that made the decisions on who were going to go in, who were going to be accepted into the programs, both the master's level and the doctoral level, and who would have access to academic fellowships, right? And so I found myself really stepping into those roles that are meaningful when you're thinking about those behind you, those to come, and to create an opportunity for others to be successful, right? So,
Yeah. Regina, what barriers did you face then that we can say now are removed or at least easier to navigate for the next cohort now?
Barriers come in a lot of different forms. Barriers in terms of, again, access to resources that are helpful. And you're talking more specifically about the University of Kentucky and the doctoral program, or just in general?
I think we could start with the University of Kentucky, but I know that there are other places where you have had influence that you could also step into that same question.
Right. And so when you think about the barriers, I think about, again, the financial barriers, and also even backing up a little bit, the barriers of having a model of someone that looks like you and maybe even from different towns like you, the small towns that you come from, and what's possible. So really, that I didn't have that, so to speak, when I was starting my journeys quite a bit. And it's a way to really recognize how important it is to have individuals that represent different communities, different backgrounds, in different segments of education, leadership, faculty that teach, because if you don't know it's possible, if you can't see yourself in those roles, you may not feel motivated, or you may not feel like it's possible. Mm-hmm. So even in University of Kentucky, I represented what was possible. Coming from West Virginia, going all the way through undergrad, still working at the time, and juggling the academic rigor, I represented that it is possible if you just, put your mind to it. And so me being that role model, or that model, that example, I think that I like to start there. And then I was very fortunate to have resources that help pay for education. And so for me, even before I got, I was able to enter into the University of Kentucky, I found myself giving money to different people that either in my family or my closest friends, because they talked about one of the barriers was I can't afford it. And I wanted to reduce that barrier to allow them to know we can reduce that barrier. And it is possible for you to pursue a higher education beyond high school. So I found myself, I don't know, now that I'm thinking about it, Melissa, that I may have actually, had my own, sort of grant or fellowship by just handing out money to my family members that were following behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then also with University of Kentucky, really being a trailblazer meant quite a bit in not only opening that pathway, but reducing those barriers that involved in, again, knowledge and understanding of who they're serving in the classroom,
Yeah.
right? And how to reach the minds of the people who have different learning environments and learning foundations. My world may be a little different than my classmates, but really, how do we reach and engage? And during my experience in the doctoral program, I had not only the experience of being a cancer fellow at the National Institute of Health, the National Cancer Institute, but also rural policy fellow in Eastern Kentucky, and working alongside of those leaders, and really looking at the doctors that provided the services to Eastern Kentucky residents there, and really helping to shape the understanding of who they're serving and how do their attitudes make a difference, or maybe even impact how they provide the service to their patients. So I challenge those providers to think a little bit beyond their own cultures and traditions and values, and to really see the patient for who they are and what they need. And another experience as I was in the program there at University of Kentucky is also working alongside of leaders that, I thought about this just now, is that I brought the rural policy leaders and the cancer researchers, and then Eastern Kentucky rural program leaders together to really address some of the disparities as it related to health and well-being, especially cancer. So really, I could call their names. I mean, like Fran Feltner in Eastern Kentucky, working with community health worker models. And that actually now, in terms of partnership, has, and I'm going back to with those partnership concepts too, is that it helps to reduce some of those barriers to access to resources.
Yeah.
And I think about that too in New Hampshire, as I'm working now with libraries. They're valuing that community health worker model in the library, so that they too can reduce those barriers to access to those resources, to build healthier communities for learning and for successful outcomes.
Yeah, yeah. Let's step into that a little bit, because as Kentucky's Division Director of Prevention and Quality Improvement, you were doing that work of building healthy communities at scale, and so can you talk a little bit more about, was there a specific program or policy that changed outcomes for most of the families that you were working with? And how did you turn those big frameworks that, county health it's a huge thing that you're dealing with. How did you put that into everyday practice in a rural place?
Wow, that's a good question. I was very motivated because, again, there were a couple things that I had on my agenda, right? That was one that from the very first time that I thought about going to undergraduate school, I was motivated because my coach and my grandmother, they died of cancer. colorectal cancer. So already had an agenda. So colorectal cancer was one. Building healthy communities was another policy that I worked toward. And then also access to prescription, drugs that could make a difference in the lives of individuals, right?
Mhm.
And so these are three among others. I work with also diabetes and working with 120 counties in Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, to help increase screenings for diabetic patients or those that were diagnosed with diabetes, not only to get screened in a timely manner, but to reduce those visits in the emergency rooms by having a provider so that they would have ongoing care and also access to, again, medications that they would need to stay and control that chronic disease. But at the heart of my sort of leadership was the colorectal cancer. And this was threefold. One, programmatic, really increasing the programs within those local communities through the local health departments, through churches, also the opportunity to educate that no one should have to die because of where you live in terms of your zip code. No one should have to die because of this cancer, because once you have that screening, this was a gold standard screening that could prevent, has a very strong chance to prevent this cancer. And so I work really with the local physicians and those that were in the community that were in alignment with that strong value of cancer being addressed in the state of Kentucky. And I was able to also work to reduce some of those preventative wellness types of behaviors, such as tobacco, really addressing tobacco use with a group, just colleagues and partners throughout public health. Also increasing access to safe places that's walkable. So I went through those intermediary types of opportunities for community to look at and assess their cities. Are they walkable? Are they safe? Those types of programmatic things. But on the policy level, working with lobbyists that were very instrumental. As a division director, I educated, but working in partnerships with practitioners and those that work alongside of legislators and in the House and in the Senate, all that matters. You have to educate. You have to also show that saving lives is also is possible, and it also it's an economical benefit, right? Sometimes people look at the money, the dollars, right? And so saving lives, screening saved lives, and it also saves dollars as well in the healthcare system. So those are kind of things that looking at the strategy and looking at all your partners in that sort of pathway to successful outcomes for health and building healthy communities. That was just an example. I hope that I answered your question on that.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's just how I approached healthy communities. And I know that healthy communities and strong schools, they work together, they rise together. And when families have access to care, preventive care, mental health resources, stability. Students come to school, they come to school ready to learn, right?
Mhm.
And public health is just one of those ways to set that stage for academic success. And if a student is hungry and can't focus on their math, they're going to struggle. They're not going to struggle because of the skill set, but it's just because their focus is not there, right? And so you have to consider what are the students' needs? What are the community needs to be successful? When you strengthen a community's health, you strengthen a family's or a child's possibility, their hope. Yeah.
Can you tell a story where a community health effort really measurably strengthened a school outcome, whether it was attendance or readiness to learn or behavior? Family engagement is another one. What have you seen community health be able to do with students? And additionally, you can't do that work alone. And
Right.
so what partners were essential and what kept them engaged in the work?
Right. So when you think about, like you said, you can't separate the well-being of a community um, from the success of its students, right? And so one of the things that I can think about, and this is actually in multiple roles that I've had throughout my trajectory, is when I addressed tobacco use in communities. And so there was a time where I was actually working out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and I designed a tobacco cessation class for youth. And this was actually during the time where we see the traditional cigarettes and then also the e-cigarettes come into life, right? And these schools in that community had policies. And if a student was found in violation of that tobacco use or e-cigarette policy, it would take them out of school, right? And so there were quite a disruptors. There's quite a few disruptors there in terms of education. So I worked with the local school system, the school leaders, and also the juvenile courts. And as an intermediary opportunity, I provided a course where students, if they were found to be in violation of using tobacco, how to keep them in school, right? And they were committed to allowing the students to commit their time outside of school and participate in this particular tobacco cessation for students course on a Saturday. And so on a Saturday, those that were found to be in violation, they were referred over to our course on Saturday. And I had help. This is where I recruited student pharmacists to be trained and also to help facilitate these courses. That was one way to keep the students in the classroom, in school, and reduce the disruption of their learning. Another thing too, as a division director here in Kentucky, we went through the fruits and vegetables and increasing access to farm to schools during that time. So we had worked with farmers and to bring fresh produce to schools, fresh produce to churches, and that increased access again to healthy foods. Now, mind you, I didn't necessarily measure that particular relationship between having access to healthier foods and being, ready to learn. But I can just imagine that it definitely had a positive impact on the student and their families in the communities.
So I want to shift us to the library connection, because the library is also a hub. It's not just a building in the community, and they can serve as community anchors as well. And so let's talk a little bit about what does the library uniquely do that a school can't do alone, especially when it comes to things like, as you're talking about, health literacy and academic opportunity. What does that look like?
Wonderful, wonderful. And as you mentioned, Melissa, that rural libraries and libraries in general are the most trusted and most accessible, and often the most stable institutions in a community, right? And they provide anywhere between digital access, they offer resources that complement the learning in the classroom, the application of your learning into the worlds that every student lives in. Even now, we see, even past as we go through COVID, they were the institutions that increase access to wellness and care programs to keep our community healthy, bridging families to support services. And so, that is sort of a part of the ecosystem there that the libraries play a role in, even looking at how libraries itself, they can't do it by themselves with regards to serving the community and the children, but they sit at the intersection of learning and belonging, right? Libraries are a welcoming institution, a welcoming community anchor where schools might be miles away. You may have a library that's closer, and that it provides access to, again, those books and resources and programs, STEM programs, STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, and math. And sometimes you find STEAM as an expanded version of STEM, adding in the arts or agriculture, right? And so they, again, are accessible and provide a place where children discover a love for reading. Mm-hmm. A lot of times in school, there's a lot of it's wonderful. The institution of learning is great in the school, and you have the different sort of process where you go from one class to the next. But in the library, you have an opportunity to, again, build on your passions, go a little deeper in your awareness and knowledge about a certain, topic. Libraries are uniquely positioned to change the future, not only for children, but for their whole family.
Mm. Yeah, that's well said. What does a durable school library partnership look like? I mean, typically there might be MOUs or there might not. There might be shared data that's being collected or there might not. They may be grant funders or grant partners in something. But But how do you keep it from being personality dependent when leadership can change so that it stays intact?
Right. That's sort of a big part of sustainability, right? Is looking at your resources and how they come together to provide this pathway for success. And you talk about creating, these learning environments that support the student and their families, right? The sustainability of those particular systems really come together about aligning your goals. And if everybody can align on the fact that in one particular community of sorts, that you want to see your children and families succeed, right? And more specifically about the student success. Mm-hmm. You come together and you align, and this is called collective impact as well, too, right? It's where you begin to have these conversations of an alignment, and you see the opportunity that the resources that are brought to the table can be exchanged, or there could be a commitment of that particular partner to continue to bring that resources for the success of that student or students. And it can be found in strategic planning, and it could be a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, really addressing certain outcomes across the cradle-to-career educational outcomes in terms of beginning with pre-K, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, all the way through to post-secondary or even gainfully employed. But as you matriculate or go across that continuum, math and reading are a big part of that success. And so when schools and libraries partner, or libraries and local health departments partner to serve that whole student, it comes in to that strategic planning and that commitment of how to use your resources. And then there are some, as you mentioned, there are memorandums of agreements that different institutions or organizations in the community, different segments of the community, will commit certain resources on an ongoing basis for the success of their students. And then also there's a memorandum of agreement, which exchanges like grants and different financial and also service-oriented resources that help stabilize that sustainability, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shift topics here, and it's really not a shift in topic. It's pointing toward networks, and that is the Rural Library Network. Can you give us a snapshot of who this organization serves, the supports that are provided, and the outcomes that you're tracking? Because I know that there are priority states that you are also focusing on.
Wonderful. So the Rural Library Network is an amazing forum. It's an amazing affiliate of Partners for Rural Impact. And when you think about Rural Library, it's like a national voice that's growing to amplify national learning, to amplify the training and resource sharing, and this, looking at it that way, it's again to increase the sense of belonging and that rural libraries have a sense that they're not working alone in this particular effort. And I always think about this mantra, and I'm going to go a little deeper in this response, but when libraries lead, students succeed, right? And when rural libraries have a seat at the national table, it brings another view, holistic view of what's possible for the student even beyond school, right? Let me go back really quick to Partners for Rural Impact. And Partners for Rural Impact, as we are now also telling our story and getting into our next iteration of strategic plan, our mission is to ensure that all rural students succeed and that they're on a path to success. And we have to recognize that there's approximately 14 million students in the rural community, right? And so our focus has been on partnerships. It's been on the rural commitment and really having an impact. And that impact would be driven by data, evidence, using results-based approaches to support children and youth from cradle to career. And we're building on what we know, right? High quality programs supporting young people. We're building on the fact that that the infrastructure, as we just talked about, ensuring that the coordination's there, the seamless alignments of resources are there. And again, driving resources into the community really takes the commitment of investing and policy change to ensure systems that support that movement. And I want to be able to say that too with our current strategic planning and our 2030 strategies is really building on four major focuses, four threads. And one is movement. The other one, and movement is building a national movement of rural leaders committed to moving the outcomes across cradle to career. And then the other one is activate, activating and influencing organizations, people to invest, right? And that also builds to strengthening the field for place-based partnerships and strengthening the capacity of these rural places to move these outcomes. And at the end of the day, we're also looking at amplifying the best practices, or as we say, bright spots that we can replicate through programs and practice that work in rural communities, right? And so the rural library built on those types of systems of thought. We convene and we bring those peer-to-peer opportunities where they can share their best and promising practices, and they can actually share what works in their community, how those collaborative models of partnerships are working, whether it be with schools, health departments, other community segments. We are also thinking about the Rural Library Network and how we're driving resources by educating those other sort of beyond the library, those other potential partners that want to invest in the success of students. So we do that. That's a systems approach, so to speak, and building that and strengthening the ecosystem there wrapped around that. the network also continues to be an opportunity, and we like to keep it simple, but we look for low cost and no cost types of training opportunities to build the capacity of those leaders in the libraries to again move the needle across the cradle to career. If it's collecting data and learning how to look at the data and work on programs that move the needle, then we work with them in technical assistance with that, get them connected to those resources that will help them lead in that way. Again, when libraries lead, students succeed, right? And throughout the year, again, any seminars or webinars that we partner with our partners, or we lead with our partners, we get them connected, the libraries connected to those opportunities to, again, build their capacity.
Mm. Now, by the time this airs, it will have already happened. But we have an eSummit that's coming up for us. It's in 2 days. For other people, it's going to be something that hopefully they can go back and take a look at the recording. But can you talk a little bit about the eSummit? Because this is not the first one. It's been very successful. It's been very well received. And so tell us a little bit about what the eSummit is and what people that are attending in a couple of days are going to be able to take away from it.
Oh, I'm so excited about this eSummit. It's annual eSummit. This is the 5th annual eSummit. And again, it's featuring national speakers. It's featuring libraries that have models that can be replicated in terms of programs and practices. It is scheduled on December the 3rd. It's a half day this year from 12 to 5:30. And we're so excited not only to work alongside of our Rural Library Community Advisory Council members to make this happen. We are also excited to have a title sponsor. BlackRock will be our title sponsor for this event, assuring that we have speakers, and we're featuring one of our national speakers would be Michael Threets. He is a librarian that is passionate about joy in libraries. Our theme is community joy in libraries. And we're so excited about having him on our show and sharing his story about library joy and how he also engages the youth through his most recent assignment as Reading Rainbow, host. And we're so excited about that. Not only are we looking to feature Michael Threets, but we're also so excited to feature a poet laureate from Montana, Chris Latre. And we try to always end our eSummit with a poet laureate. And so Chris Latre, identifying as a Native American, really brings a view of, again, family, rural community traditions and hope and through his story. And we're excited about that. So it's all about joy. And not only are we focusing on our eSummit, which is in a couple days for the Rural Library Network, but we're so excited also in 2026 to open up the registration for Rural Summit. And this is Partners for Rural Impact's signature, one of their our signature events. I want to also share one of Partners for Rural Impact's signature events, Rural Summit, and that's April the 12th through the 15th. And next year it will be hosted in New York, and it would be in Buffalo, New York, at the Buffalo Convention Center. So please take time to register And even if you're interested in presenting, again, definitely, I would love to see you there. Definitely.
And it is worth going to. It's a very diverse group of people from all stakeholder groups, and a lot of good connections, networking, and a lot of good information that's shared.
And I'm glad that you also reminded me on the target for Rural Library Network. We have membership. We have over 1,700 members in our network. And that membership represents all 50 states. And we're so excited about, even as of today, we're really close to 500 registrations.
Wow.
For the eSummit, representing all 50 states. So this event targets not only the school rural libraries, but also the public rural libraries and academic libraries that are in rural communities, those that are partners of libraries in those communities, and also funders of those libraries as well. And then, there could be friends of libraries. It could be students who are in various educational programs that also attend and participate in the Rural Library Network eSummit. But then also the Rural Summit also is a large event too, on average, bringing together over 750 individuals from, again, the continuum of pre-K, those that are working as coordinators and educators and administrators and legislators, policymakers, funders of a sorts. So all are coming together, again, invested in the strategies and the policies that help move those cradle-to-career educational outcomes forward.
Yeah. Regina, you talked about the strategic plan that PRI has just revisited and revitalized for the future. And can you give us an insight into the next 5 years? What is PRI and also the Rural Library Network going to be doing to help support rural communities across the country in the years ahead?
Really good. When I think about the strategies, again, those 4 different threads that I was talking about with regards to movement, accelerate, strengthen, and also bright spots. It's really positioning rural communities across all 50 states, and really honing in on what we've learned over the course of over 25 years in Eastern Kentucky, and replicating that into all 50 states, right? So what we hope to see is a phase or steps toward driving investments into these particular states. We've already started in New Hampshire, Missouri, parts of California, so we're hoping to drive resources so that those particular segments of the community that are invested into the success of students can also be supported in their efforts of learning. The actual systems development and policy development as well to sustain the movement forward across those threads that of our strategic plan, right? So our goal is really to have successful models throughout all 50 states per se.
Just a small thing.
It's small, but Small, even a small team can be mighty, can be powerful, right? So you gotta, we start small, but we're definitely going to have mighty outcomes, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to being a part of that partnership from an internal standpoint, but also partnering with our external partners who are invested in this opportunity too. So.
Regina, is there anything that I have not asked you about that you want to make sure that our listeners are taking away from this conversation?
Good question. The main thing too is I had to think about rural and urban. There's opportunity for learning and sharing and understanding the systems that are braided together across that particular line. And I want the listeners to really understand that the rural community is very unique. The rural economic strength is there that supports schools and families, but we can learn also strategies and different types of systems that have been built in urban communities too, right? When we all work together across those lines, we understand that we're leveraging every dollar, we're leveraging every heart, every service for the purpose of our children and families. From that standpoint, I see that it helps to build that economic mobility, right? And so that was just one thing that we hardly ever talk about, is really learning across those lines, the rural and an urban connection. Right?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think people don't realize how similar the issues in rural and urban places are, and it really comes down to access. It might look different, the solutions might be different, but there is more in common between those
Right.
two locales than I think people realize. So that's a good point.
Excellent. Yes.
So I always end with the same question, and that is, what does the term rural advantage mean to you?
Oh, when I think about rural advantage, I think about how, again, that rural communities are really built on strong personal connections, families, schools, libraries, community leaders. I really think about growing up in my small community, and everybody knew each other's name. I knew that when I was in the community, all I had to do is say, "Oh, my father is Manuel Washington," or "My mom was Patricia Washington," and they say, "Oh, all right, good family, we know." And so when you think about those relationships, it really matters, because now you're thinking about how those resources come together to help build up students, and also to help students to be successful. And it mobilizes their sort of their journey forward. So that deep relationship that supports every child. I think about that when I think about the rural advantage, that, again, the caring connections that are there. I think about, again, libraries as trusted anchors. And I think about how libraries can reach families who may not regularly engage in schools and in school activities. Libraries are safe and welcoming spaces for learning, and they provide resources for literacy, technology, and also career and college explorations. This is a trusted resource for accelerating accelerating, cradle-to-career efforts in terms of expanding who is reached, how they're reached, and when they're reached. But think about also the advantage in terms of the ability to coordinate across systems. So really having that interconnectedness, the alignment of goals. Communication is so imperative for successful rural advantage, I think. So when you have a system of communication, even the alignments of how resources are being used, and if you can align those resources toward a given goal and have shared ownership, and shared ownership in this case of student success, that is what really makes the rural community stronger. And I think about also how students see the value of their place, right? And how they're connected to their rural place. You have travel, you have agricultural, you have African Americans in the South, you have different parts of rural that's important. Appalachia is a big part of that. And when students see their culture valued and reflected in their schools, in their libraries, in their workplace, in their learning places, in their homes, the sense of belonging and confidence and that sense of proud, being proud of where you're from. And it definitely important to achievement, educational achievement, and definitely a commitment to persistence, right? That's what I think about when I think about rural advantage. And I think about really the wraparound services that also bridge gaps, especially the digital divide. I want to tell you a quick story with regards to Wi-Fi and broadband. As you know, that's something that's an ongoing challenge, but I think we're hopefully going to see some movements toward decreasing that particular barrier. But as I traveled around the United States to the various different libraries, I noticed that there are families, even after school hours, setting in community at the library in the parking lots, having access to broadband. I know when I was able to go to Hawaii and Molokai, the island of Molokai, when I was doing a site visit, even the hotel, there was only one hotel on the island, and I didn't have access to broadband connection, Wi-Fi at all at the hotel. I had to drive myself to the library parking lot just to have access for phone and also my computer to do work. It makes a difference when families have resources and these wraparound resources. It makes a difference in the success of the lives of our children and families, and having also the shared and bridging generational connections is important too. And I think we need to think about, again, powerful narratives in the rural community, really telling the story. And we need to start with that, again, babies, school age children, teens, parents, grandparents. There's so much that we can actually do and that we do in rural communities. That rural advantage is sharing those stories, coming back home, and we hear these stories told, even as we're coming off this whole opportunity of Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays, is where multiple generations come together and share the stories of various, experiences. And that reinforces our learning, our commitment to, again, that community, and opportunities and things of that nature. So, yeah, that's what comes together. When I think about the Rural Advantage and from the context for Partners for Rural Impact and Rural Library Network, it means that rural libraries are not just, again, a place where you check out books. It's just not a place for just service providers. Libraries are catalysts. They're connectors. They are community. They're community engines that help ensure that all rural students succeed from cradle to career.
I love that answer. Well, Regina, I want to thank you not only for spending some time with me today, but really for translating a lifetime of public health and systems leadership into very practical rural solutions, and for placing libraries at the heart of how communities learn and heal and grow. So thanks for spending some time with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure working with you and the work that you do, and having you as a partner is always a great thing. So thank you for having me today.
Honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. And friends, here's the ask. Pick one idea from today, either draft that school library MOU or schedule a pop-up health and literacy night, or choose a shared metric that you're going to track together and try it for the next 30 days. And then let us know what happened. Your stories sharpen all of us. If this episode helped you, please like the show, subscribe to the Rural Scoop, and leave a comment with your takeaway. Be sure to share this with a colleague who cares about libraries and learning as well. Your reviews help other rural leaders find us, and I read every note. Connect with me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. In rural leadership, our shared story is our strength. And when we lead together, we thrive together. I'm your host, Melissa Sadorf, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at msadorf1, and X at msadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from Vela Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit velaconsultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the Rural Advantage.